yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Just in case you didn't hear the announcement, the Zondo Commission of Inquiry has now moved premises to Morning Live. And this is the new venue. Well, all jokes aside, the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, loosely known as the Zondo Commission, which came into being in March last year, is calling on all South Africans who can provide information that can assist the Commission to come forward and to present that evidence. Our guest this morning, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, is here to guide us through some of the processes should individuals need to contact the Commission and also how they can go about availing themselves. So welcome, Deputy Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I tried to start it off on a light note about moving the venue for the Commission. But perhaps just on that note, there has been a criticism of where the Commission is sitting.
Yes.
And this gives us an opportunity to explain to South Africans how you arrived at that decision, perhaps.
Yes. Well, let me say the criticism that I've heard of is that the Commission is taking place at a venue that is expensive and that we should have gone to certain halls that we could have used more cheaply. But what I can say is that after I had been appointed as chairperson of the Commission, I said to the team and Public Works, because Public Works is the department that obtains venues for government-related, bodies. I said we mustn't use a venue that's going to be too expensive, but we must also look at accessibility. People must find it easy to get to the venue. But also, I said we didn't have the luxury of a long time to look for a venue. And I know that various venues were looked at, including venues that would have been provided by municipalities, which would have been, as I understand, free. All of those were looked at, but in the end, they were not suitable for the purpose of the Commission or not big enough. And ultimately, this is the venue that we found. And you might recall that at that time also, there was quite a lot of pressure that the Commission should get started. So we found the venue that we're using. And I believe that, we searched. And ultimately, that's the venue that we found.
Deputy Chief Justice, the Commission has been in existence for a full year now, even though the hearing started in August. You started your work in March.
Yes.
How responsive has the public been to coming forward with information?
Well, as you know, I have been inviting South Africans and calling upon people who have got information about state capture, about, corruption, to come forward. There has been a response, but it's been less than what I would have liked. I would like more response, particularly from people who know very serious allegations of corruption that may have taken place, issues of state capture. We have received some responses. I mean, there have been some ministers who have come forward. There have been some directors general who came forward. We will remember Mr. Themba Masego, who was a director general in GCIS and was later moved to DPSA. He came to give evidence, and recently former Minister Ramatloti came and gave evidence. Former Minister of Communications, General Nyanda, came to give evidence. There have been other ministers who have come forward. There have been other ministers who have said they'll come and give evidence. But when one looks at the total picture, it's still not enough. There are, I believe, a lot of ministers, past and present, who must be knowing a lot of information about state capture, who I believe have not come forward. They need to come forward. And there would be, I think, a lot of past and present directors general, chief directors, and other people and ordinary South Africans who got to know about activities that would fall under state capture and corruption, and I would like them to come forward. And in that regard, I think one must also emphasize what the Commission is about, and I will say that this in the way I see it. I see this Commission as very important for South Africa. In the life of every nation and country, there comes a time when the country must take a look at itself. The nation must take a look at itself and say certain things must stop, that certain things must change. I believe that this commission is about a new struggle in our country, a struggle for a country that is free from corruption. I know that there is no country in the world that is completely free of corruption, but I think there would be countries where the levels of corruption are so low that we can say, for all intents and purposes, that they are corruption-free. I think that this commission seeks to make a contribution to make this country a better country, to contribute to this country ultimately becoming a corruption-free country. And all South Africans should come forward and assist it, support it, give information so that they in that way contribute to a better country for us all.
So without delving too much into the realm of speculation, why do you believe people are reluctant to come forward?
I think it may be a number of reasons, and I can state some of them. I think some of the people might be fearing that if they came forward and disclosed certain wrong things that were done by certain people in the past, or even maybe at the moment, that they might fear that that might affect their careers adversely. Some might fear that they will be dealt with by certain forces within our country. So we might be having that fear. But what I do know is that we in South Africa have people who are very courageous. We come from a period when there was a struggle against apartheid, and people were prepared to sacrifice and take risks that were very serious for themselves, very serious for their families, because they believed in the cause of freedom for South Africa. We now should look at this new struggle for a corruption-free South Africa, for a better South Africa, and say, each one of us, what am I prepared to sacrifice? What am I prepared to do to make my own contribution? And I think that's what we should do.
Let's assume for a moment, Deputy Chief Justice, that someone gathers the courage to say, okay, I can take the reputational risk. I'm prepared to suffer the reputational damage and lose whatever comes with that. But if they look at what has transpired at the Commission thus far, some of the security concerns that have been highlighted, one looks at something like equipment being stolen, and some people would say, oh, well, these things happen. But then during Griti's testimony, for example, there was talk about someone being in the precinct who was intimidating him. So people could fear for their lives as well. What sort of reassurance is there for them in that regard?
Well, let me say that it was quite concerning to hear about some of the issues that you have mentioned, but I gave immediately instruction that everything should be done to make sure that there is no repeat of such. Since then, there hasn't been a repeat of that kind of problem. I am confident that it's not going to be easy for a repeat to happen in terms of what I've been assured in terms of measures being taken, because there is a full appreciation of the effects that such things could have in terms of people coming forward. But I believe that when people look at what the Commission seeks to achieve, what it is there for, and look at the bigger picture, people will give support and people will come forward if they really want to assist. And I think despite the fact that we haven't seen as many people as I would like to have seen coming forward. We haven't seen as many of them coming forward as that. I believe that people are going to be coming forward because the numbers have been going up. More and more people have come up. Some of the people that have come forward, I had heard before that they were reluctant, but ultimately they made the decision to come forward. I think as we go forward, more people will come forward and assist, and I call upon them to do that.
And then, of course, there's the question of people bringing evidence before the commission and the right of those implicated to cross-examine so that justice, and you are the authority here, is not only, seen to be done, but is actually done. So the Pravin Gordhan, Tom Moyane situation, that's quite topical at the moment. And it raises the question, and perhaps again an opportunity to educate. So how does the commission go about determining how the cross-examination gets done and whether people are actually allowed leave to cross-examine? What is the process?
Excuse me. Well, our rules are clear. Our rules say that one, there is no right to cross-examination. You have a right to cross-examine in a court of law, but in a commission such as this, definitely in our commission, you don't have a right. But you do have a right to apply to the chairperson for leave to cross-examine. And the rules say I have to look at necessity. Is it necessary? I have to look at whether to allow cross-examination will advance the work of the commission, and I will look at all the factors. There are cases where I've already granted leave. There are cases where I've refused leave. So I will continue to look at these applications with an open mind and seek to strike the right balance, because it is important that those who are implicated have the chance to put their side of the story. It is important that in an appropriate case, I grant them leave to cross-examine, but there would be cases where it's not appropriate and then it will not be granted.
So this is one, of course, that you still need to decide on. However, what I thought was interesting that was raised yesterday, one of the legal arguments put forward, was that the rogue unit was invoked again, and it was said, but there was an inquiry that dealt with the SARS issue. But then my question is, there have been all sorts of inquiries all over the place that have dealt with different aspects of what could be deemed state capture. So how do you determine, what is admissible perhaps and what isn't?
Well, let me say, with regard to the application that was brought by Mr. Moyane for leave to cross-examine Minister Gordhan, I can't discuss that one, but in general, you will know that this is not exactly the same thing, but you will know that there have been investigations into allegations that involve corruption and allegations of state capture, investigations that have been done by other bodies, including Parliament and the Hawks and so on. And the view we have taken is that on the one hand, while we don't want to rerun what other people have done, but at the same time we are not just going to take what they have done and adopt it as ours. We will look at it, we will seek to satisfy ourselves whether it's something that we are happy to use, and where we are happy to use it, we will use it, and where we are not happy, we will do our own investigation. So that's the position we have taken in regard to investigations that have been done by other bodies. But as I say, it's not exactly what you are asking, but I can't discuss that one.
Fair enough, because you've yet to make a determination in that regard. With regard to the evidence leaders, what exactly is their role? Because it would seem as though they are going through what has been submitted into evidence, but there has been a criticism that perhaps they are not probing enough. So what exactly is their role?
Well, their role is to lead evidence for the benefit of the commission, and their role is to lead evidence that may show that there was state state capture, or that might show that there was no state capture, that might show that there was corruption or no corruption. They need to lead evidence impartially. That is the first point. The second point is that sometimes people think the evidence leader is not probing enough because they know certain things and think that the evidence leader knows the same things. But the evidence leader is guided by the evidence that has been collected and put before him or her. And if people know certain things and think that a particular witness should be asked certain things, if they don't bring that evidence before the commission, the evidence leader won't know that. But what will happen is that if evidence is put before the commission that relate to a particular witness, the evidence leaders will ask questions, including difficult questions, to any witness. So these witnesses whose evidence they lead are not like witnesses of the commission. They are just witnesses who come forward, who have information, and want to tell the information to the commission. The evidence leader can ask any of those witnesses difficult questions for purposes of establishing the truth. So it all depends on what is available to them. And sometimes people have read certain things in the newspapers, but those things have not been put before the evidence leaders by way of statements as yet. And when they do get put before them, they will use them and probe further.
And of course, as one reads and speaks to people, the name of the former president keeps coming up, Jacob Zuma. And everybody wants to know if this is part state capture and in one form or another, the name of the state president doesn't directly prop up, but it would seem by implication or by association somehow, he's always lurking there in the background. So as far as the commission goes, people want to know, what is the Jacob Zuma situation? Will the commission be subpoenaing him to appear before it at some point?
Well, let me say that former President Zuma was the head of state, was the president during a certain time in the country, and there are allegations about certain things that are said to have happened during the time that he was president of the country. And when you talk about allegations of state capture, certainly I would like to hear at some stage as what he knew as president of the country, what does he, or what is his views, what are his views about, state capture, because this was during his time. I want to know about the views of the current president, and he has said publicly that he will come to the commission and give evidence, and he has absolutely no problem about that. Former President Zuma has himself, as I understand the position from his lawyers, made it clear that he will cooperate with the commission in every way. So I believe that there should be no problem whatsoever in him coming forward. And we will hear more evidence, and at a certain stage, I believe he will come.
And then, just as we start to round this up, firstly, just an update on what's happened with Khotso de Vere after him being implicated by Angelo Agrizzi and then placed on special leave. Is he still on special leave?
He's still on special leave. There is the allegation, the investigation into the allegation against him is still ongoing. I had hoped that it would have been the investigation would have been completed by now, but it hasn't been completed. I have asked those who are doing the investigation to give it priority so that we have finality in regard to that allegation as soon as possible. Yeah.
And then just finally, you are here this morning as the Deputy Chief Justice who's chairing this commission, asking people who have information to come forward and present that information that they may have to assist in determining whether state capture took place and to what extent it did to come to the commission. Is that not, is it proper for you as the chairperson of the commission to do that legalistically?
Yes, it is proper. You see, when you sit as a judge in a court of law, you don't do that. But when you sit as chairperson of a commission that is investigating allegations, that's different. So that's why it's proper to do it as chairperson of the commission.
And perhaps just finally, for those who want to come forward,
yes.
How can they go about it? What are the processes that they should follow?
One, they can walk into the offices of the commission, which are at 17 Empire Road, Hillside, second floor, Hillside House in Parktown. They can phone, and I think I know the number off by heart, but I don't want to take a chance. They can phone a number, it's 010-2140651, 010-2140651. They can phone that number, and then they will be connected with an investigator or a member of the legal team who will then talk to them in due course, and statements can be taken.
Well, Deputy Chief Justice, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. And
Yes.
that was the Deputy Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, who joined us, specifically inviting the public to come forward with evidence and also explaining how to go about it. And the Commission can be reached on 010-214-0651. Or you can also go to the website, and it is up on your screen right now. And thanks to the Deputy Chief Justice, it's news time with Leanne.